Yo, what up, a-holes? Thank you for tuning in to the Holistic A-Hole podcast. My name is Eric Levi, and I'm the Holistic A-Hole. How the hell are you doing today? Wherever you are, listening to this in your headphones, on your speakerphone, blasting it on the loudspeaker at home or at work or at the gym or cleaning or cooking or wiping diapers, whatever you're doing. Thank you for tuning into the Holistic A-Hole podcast. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Here in New York City, it feels like, I would say, the first day of summer, and that's about a couple weeks too early, but it's just a warm day. We have a little hot spell here at the beginning of May, and then it's going to get back down to cold again, and that's just what happens when you live in New York. It gets you excited for a couple days, and then you just go back to the sad, miserable weather you had for most of the year. And it's not fun. The cold sucks, and I'm really sick of it. But, you know, when you're holistic a-hole, you try not to let the weather get you down. You can't let your mood be dictated by the weather. It's so far outside your control that I try not to let it bother me. And for the most part, it doesn't. Except for hot-ass days like today where, you know, it just creeps up on you, and I don't have the AC unit installed, nor am I going to install it because, again, it's just going to go back to cold again, and the work that it takes to install the AC, to not have to use it again for another month, and then not to mention once the AC's up, the cold air seeps through the AC, the lovely Miss A-Hole starts getting cranky about it, you know, because she gets cold in the middle of July. So, you know, it's just dealing with it. It's just finding that place of stillness, finding my breath, finding my center, and then essentially just reminding myself, it's okay, man. The weather's okay. It's a little uncomfortable. You get through it. That's what you do. That's why we practice holistic healing and holistic awareness. Man, I feel great. I'm hopped up on coffee, a little bit of coffee, but I feel good, man. Got the serotonin, the dopamine, just blasting through the blood-brain barrier, feeling good. And today, I'm going to talk about a thing that hit the news this week that kind of caught me off guard and piqued my interest because this is actually something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I was kind of trying to figure out the best way to bring it in. And what better way than a tragic story about a person losing their life? Oh, man. That's right. Today we're talking about the float tank. But before I talk about the float tank, first I want to say welcome to any new Holistic A-Hole listeners. Thanks for finding the podcast however you found it. Hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, even if you don't enjoy it, just click open your phone, hit the subscribe button, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you're a returning listener, you haven't done this, just subscribe to the podcast. It takes about a second to do. And at the end of the podcast, in the middle, if you realize, man, I freaking love the Holistic A-Hole podcast, click on over to your iTunes and leave the old boy a review. Make it 5 stars, say something nice, and find me on social media. I'm on all the socials under Holistic A-Hole, Twitter at Holistic A-Hole, Instagram Holistic A-Hole, Facebook page Holistic A-Hole. And if you figure something that you want to maybe contact me, you want to maybe hear an episode, you want to request a topic, feel free to shoot me an email to holistic.a.hole@gmail.com. Or, of course, any of the social platforms work. Shoot me a message. Let me know you're out there. Let me know what you think. So, we're going to talk about this dude. A story of a dude who, this last week, unfortunately, tragically, lost his life inside of a sensory deprivation float tank. And this was just a story. You know, I wasn't consciously looking for news like this or anything like that. I was just on my socials. And somebody on my social posted the article that this guy passed away while in a sensory deprivation flotation tank. And If you're not familiar with the sensory deprivation flotation tank, it goes by a lot of different names. Some people call it the float tank. That's how I know it. Some people call it the sensory deprivation tank. Some people call it the tank. If you're a fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, you hear Joe talking all the time. He's got a float tank in his house, apparently, and he floats several times a week, I believe, which is fantastic, man. I did my first float when I was in Sedona, actually. We talked about the Sedona trip a couple episodes ago. And when I was in Sedona, I like to get weird. I like to explore my consciousness. And every time I go there, I do it by, hiking the vortexes, getting on the ground, doing like a meditation, finding my breath, connecting to my spirit, to my subconscious, to my deeper inner true spiritual self. But this time around, did it a little differently. Got a group on to go to a float spa. And I'd never floated before. Always heard about it, like I said, on the Joe Rogan podcast. And was always interested. And was just randomly on Groupon looking for something fun to do. And found the float tank Groupon. And if you're familiar with floating, or if you're not familiar with floating can be kind of expensive because it's one of these kind of new biohacky things to do. And we'll talk about what I just said, that term, that phrase, biohacking, here in just a minute. But basically what you do is it's a tank. It's exactly what you're picturing in your mind. It's a tank. It's like a pod. If you've seen like The Matrix, and you saw the babies in the pod, it's kind of like that, except it's on the ground. You're not like floating in a weird sphere, in a weird orb filled with juices. It's basically like a little mini, like think of like a hot tub, but the water is like lukewarm. It's not hot. And the thing has a cover and it closes. And you go inside, and the water has an extremely high amount of Epsom salt. It's sodium, I think it's sodium phosphate, I believe. It's a very specific type of salt, but basically it's Epsom salt, whatever kind of salt Epsom salt is. And I think it's like 400 pounds or something like that in one of these tanks. And what that translates to is when you get inside the water, your body just naturally floats. If you've ever been to the Dead Sea, as a Jew, that's my birthright. I get to go to Israel for free. This trip is actually called Birthright. Just for being a Jew, just for being Jewish, I get to go to Israel for free for 10 days. And one of the things they do is they bring you to the Dead Sea and you get to float. So I have floated in the Dead Sea. And, when I did that, it wasn't like a spiritual experience or anything. For a lot of people, that is a spiritual experience. I was so just not even close to being on that kind of radar. So for me, it was just floating and then realizing that I had all these little cuts and, fucking scars and all this stuff on my legs and my hands, because as soon as you get in the Dead Sea, it's like the salt just starts ripping all of your wounds apart, and you re-feel them. If you cut your toenails too short, or if you banged your knee on a desk, or you stubbed your toe, or you got a scrape on your arm, you're gonna feel it in the Dead Sea. And that's no exception to the float tank. You lay in the float tank, all of a sudden, man, you got all your cuts and scabs and scars. You start feeling them. But basically what happens is you go in the float tank and you float, and you close the pod and you float in the darkness and you close your eyes. And there's different variations on ways to do it. Some people like music, like I was playing some kind of trippy new age Native American flute music, which gives you a nice steady theta wave inducing, sound tonality, which is cool. But that's basically what the deprivation tank does. The whole idea is for you to go inside and then just kind of lose sense of your physical body. And then the therapy comes by physically removing your mind from your body. And I'm going to talk more about this in a future episode because it's something since I've done the float tank, I've started thinking a lot about, which is like the separation of your thoughts and your body. This is a real kind of like Buddhist, kind of oneness, meditative idea, which is like disconnecting your thoughts from your physical body. Like I talk a lot about meditation, and still to this day, like I meditate, usually pretty much every single day in my own special way. I have like breathing techniques. I don't just sit there and I don't just like sit there in silence, although that is an effective meditation. I like to do some breathing exercises. And essentially what that does is it kind of disconnects you from your body into your subconscious a little bit, and you just want to become aware. You're an observer, right? That's the whole thing with meditation, is observe your breath, get focused, find stillness. That's what you hope to accomplish through meditation, is to quiet your mind, because people, especially in America in the 21st century, are tortured by their minds. Tortured. This is why anxiety and depression medications are so lucrative, because all people want to do is just escape this consciousness, escape this suffering, just constantly running this, recording of being a failure, in your head. You can't make it stop, or being afraid of what's going to happen in the future, anxiety, and then just playing these feedback loops over and over and over again in your mind. It drives you crazy. It's driving me crazy just talking about it, just thinking about it. It's maddening, and people are suffering with this. And this is why meditation is so awesome, because that's the practice of it. The practice is of slowing down your thoughts, slowing down your mind, slowing down the regret, actually eliminating the regret, eliminating the anxiety, and then just learning to live in the state of the now. And if even if you meditate every day, I don't live in the now all day, every day. I spend a lot of time in this other crazy shit. I still suffer, but not to the point where I need to medicate myself with prescription medication. That's what I have weed for, which I'm not condoning it. If you can get through it without the help of weed or anything, then please do that. But me, I like to smoke the doobs, I'm sure there's something wrong with it, but this is what I do. It's how I live my life. It's not for everybody, but you do you, right? By all means, don't turn to alcohol. Don't start turning to drugs. If you can do it drug-free, that's the best way to do it. But it all comes down to just living in the moment. And, this idea of separating the mind from the body is such a profound thing to like have this concept that you are not your thoughts. While you're walking around and you're like, fuck, why did I say that to that guy? Why did I do that? Why did I end that relationship, man? I should have not done that. I should not quit that job. I should have gotten that job. I should have stayed back home. I should have fucking left home earlier. You're just tortured with these thoughts all day. But when you make that stop, when you pull the emergency brake and you're like, wait a second, hold on, time out. This thinking like this is driving my body crazy. It's fucking putting me in a panic. I'm having panic attacks. It's driving my cortisol through the roof. Essentially my body is feeling threatened. I'm in fight or flight now. So now my body's not working right. My digestion's not working right. My skin starts breaking out. You start having, autoimmune diseases. Your immune system starts getting confused. People start dealing with, fucking memory loss and depression. I mean, it just goes on and on. But when you pull the emergency brake and you go, wait a second, man, hold on. Let me just stop the fucking thing for a second. Let me just pull the scratcher off the record. It's Thursday afternoon. It's just Thursday afternoon. I'm sitting here walking from the store to my car, or I'm walking around, I'm in a parking lot right now. And this is where I am, and I'm safe. There's no reason to be afraid of this. Nothing's happening to me. Nobody's coming after me. Nobody thinks bad about me. All the people, especially even on social media, it's like people will threaten you. People will tell you you're an idiot, whatever. Who cares? They're just fucking imaginary trolls. They don't exist. When you come to that realization and you're just like, I'm centered, I'm fine, I'm safe, take a breath. I got my breath, I'm cool. I got my arms, my legs, my fingers, my toes, my hair, some of us, my eyes, my mouth. I got everything. I'm cool. This is that idea of separating your panicked mind from what's really happening in the world. And when you start to find that peace, that's when you really start to explore your consciousness. That's where you relax. That's where the creativity comes from. That's where the thriving comes from. That's where the gratitude comes from. That's where just living a better life, even if you have jack shit, even if you're piss broke, you sleep on a fucking air mattress, but you can find happiness. Whatever it is, man. They say the happiest people in the world are the people with the least amount of shit. The minimalist movement, you don't need all the stuff you think you need in your mind. You are not your thoughts. You're your body and your spirit. And whatever thought you don't want to have, you don't have to have that thought. And if you have that thought and you don't like that thought, you can be like, thought, hey man, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you, throwing up that warning signal, that warning flare for me to panic a little bit, but I'm cool, man. I'm cool, you're cool, we're all cool. You acknowledge that fucking thought that's making you suffer, and then you go on with your day, and you realize everything's okay. Everything's okay. And in a weird way, man, this is what the float tank actually does. It's a hack. It's a total hack, So when I got in the float tank, when I did the float tank, for me it was like I didn't know what to expect. They, the place I went, they showed us a video before we went in, and they were like, this is what the float tank is, this is what it does. And essentially what it does is the ability to lose sense of your body, to deprivate your senses. Now you don't feel your arms, your legs, your back, your stomach. You don't even feel your neck or your head. You're just floating there. And when you allow yourself to just relax, it takes a little bit of time, I've only done one float. There's people who say it takes a couple floats before you actually successfully really even do it right. But, because I'm a holistic a-hole, because I meditate and I do yoga and I do all this spiritual stuff, I kind of was able to get there a little faster, but still did not feel like I really even came close to mastering it. I still would probably feel like I need to do at least 5 floats before I even kind of really fully grasp what happened. But I did the float for an hour, and for me the float was like a lot of kind of, at first it was like getting settled in, because it can be kind of uncomfortable at first. You're in the tank, the thing is closed. If you're claustrophobic at all, you have to kind of catch your breath. You got to kind of let your body relax. And then you start to feel all your little aches and pains, and you adjust your body a little bit. And it's like, it's almost like, as you lose sense of the rest of your body, these little kind of pain points start buzzing. If you have tightness and stiffness in certain parts of your body, it starts to get pronounced in the tank. Like me, I don't have any broken bones or haven't had any major surgeries or anything like that, thank God. But, I have been athletic. I have spent a lot of time in the gym. I played sports when I was a kid. Still play sports a little bit as a grown-ass man. So I have a few little pain points on my body, my knee, my shoulders. And the tank was like, hey, buddy, remember these places? And, I would feel some tightness in my shoulder, and you kind of adjust a little bit. But then when you hit that point, when you know you're really doing it, you start to kind of lose consciousness, almost kind of like you're falling asleep a little bit, even though you don't necessarily fall asleep. Maybe people do, It reminded me of like a Shavasana at the end of a yoga class. Like when you do an hour and a half of yoga, and then the instructor's like, okay, we're going to just lay down and just kind of let your body go lifeless. They call it the corpse pose. Just lifeless. You feel, where I go to yoga, they do a full, what they call yoga nidra sesh, where they, he just kind of takes you through all the different parts of your body. He's like, you feel your hands, feel sensation in your hands, now let it go. Feel sensation in your shoulders and your arms, your knees, your legs, let it go. And then takes you in a real deep place. And when you get to that place, that's when the mind really starts going to work, because what it does is it puts you in that theta, puts you in those theta brain waves. That's where all of it comes from. That's like the hypnosis brainwave. That's the brainwave that hits right before you fall asleep. When you're tired, you hit the pillow and you're just, in a minute you're gonna be out. Those theta brainwaves are what hits you right before you go out. And a lot of times you might have like your most creative ideas and thoughts come from those brainwaves. I actually heard on a podcast recently, Edison, what he would do is he would, in his lab, I think every day, or he would do this throughout the week, he would find a time and he would be like, okay, I'm going to nap, all right? And so what he does is he sits down and he lets himself start to go to sleep. And just before he falls asleep, he has an alarm clock that just wakes him up. And then he goes from there and just starts writing frantically all of his ideas. So he doesn't quite hit his sleep state. He hits just before his sleep state. And that's theta waves. And when you're in theta waves, again, that's where your mind is totally, like, your conscious mind is gone and your subconscious mind is very loud. And your subconscious mind is just doing all the recording and processing. And it's basically like a hard what would you call it? Like a hard drive. Basically, it takes in data, it records it, but then it plays it back, and it plays it back in the background of your day, and it's what influences everything. While your conscious mind is making all the decisions and, essentially is the one stressing you out and, where a lot of your creativity comes from, your subconscious mind is the one feeding you all of the shit, all of the idea, to where all the raw materials come from. And that's what the tank does. The tank gets you into that mindset. And granted, you might not have your most brilliant ideas in the tank, but you might, after you get out of the tank, or you might after you float for a little while, after you've done it for a while. But for me, like, going in, it was a weird experience because, I've been trying to do this visualization stuff where, like, I'll hit those theta brain waves and then just start visualizing stuff that I want to manifest in my life. And you have to use kind of conscious thought for that. So it's almost like a catch-22 where it's like you want your mind to go unconscious, but yet you keep feeding it conscious thinking. So I haven't figured that out yet. But when I got out of the tank, I felt real weird. Like I felt like I was in that real rest and digest, that parasympathetic area. But it was like my brain was wanting to think so deep, but I couldn't really translate the thoughts that it was giving me. But then, like, since I've done it, man, like, so much weird stuff has been happening. Like, for instance, for the last couple years, at 100% the last year, I would say the last couple years, I don't have sleep problems per se, but I do have a problem staying asleep. Like I'll sleep and then I'll wake up and I gotta go pee, right? Go to the bathroom. And that happens anywhere from 1 to 7 or 8 times a night. I mean, it's crazy. Like, to the point where I was like, man, is something wrong with my prostate? Like, what's going on? I went to the doctor, I got my blood levels checked, nothing. I'm totally healthy. So clearly it had to be something subconscious, had to be something mental. And I was like, what the hell? Like, what is it? I have no idea what it is. Didn't even know it was something mental. I thought it was physical. I thought I just had a small bladder and whatever. Then I did the tank, and ever since I've done the tank, like, I've been able to sleep pretty much 8 straight hours throughout the night, only waking up because, like, somebody was outside my window screaming or something like that. I live in Queens, so it's just kind of what comes with the territory. But, then I also noticed, like, all of a sudden, like, I've been dealing with this kind of, like, eczema problem on my hand, and I have a pretty flawless diet for the most part. And I've done all of these weird, like, kind of what do you call them? Where you strip away elimination diets. I've been doing different variations of elimination diets, limiting things that I might think I have a food sensitivity to, doing that throughout the year, a little success, but still not much. Then all of a sudden, eczema, gone. Skin cleared up. Sleep problems, gone after doing the tank. I generally feel still in a very parasympathetic state where it's like not, I've piled a lot of stuff on my plate in the last couple months, and I feel really no stress about any of it. I have a lot of big projects and, things that I'm working on, and yet somehow it causes no stress in my life. I feel very fluid with everything. The tank is real, and I can't really speak more about it until I start doing it more. But off of my first experience in the tank, I gotta say it was very positive. The only problem with it is it's expensive. Okay, so this is why it's kind of like a Silicon Valley thing, because you have to have Silicon Valley money or Wall Street money to be able to do the tank a lot. Which is unfortunate because the people who need the tank the most are the people who are not working in these places. So maybe down the road, somebody can invent some kind of program where it's like providing tanks for underprivileged people or something. Floats for underprivileged people. Wouldn't that be nice? Bring floats to the underprivileged neighborhoods, Float in the hood. That's what I'd like to do. But back to the story of this dude who apparently died in a float tank. That's what we wanted to talk about in the whole thing at the beginning of the podcast. So this guy's name is Aaron Trawick, and apparently he was the CEO of this biohacking company called Ascendance. And apparently what they are is like a biohacking company that creates kind of like DIY medical. So he wants to cure AIDS and cancer and herpes with his own kind of do-it-yourself mixtures, which are, I'm all about that. I would like to make sure that the shit works, but I make my own toothpaste. I make my own food. I don't trust any of the pharmaceutical medications. And he got a lot of shit because what he did is I believe this was in Austin, Texas. He did this maybe. It was at some, it was in Austin, a biohacking conference in Austin, Texas in February. This dude, Aaron Trawick, basically, and his company's called Ascendance Biomedical, did a Facebook Live where he injected himself with a homemade herpes medication. And quite frankly, I don't know what he was trying to prove, because if he has herpes, not sure if he's going to be able to prove to us immediately that the herpes is gone. All we can really do is kind of take his word for it, unless he's going to planned on showing us, like a time-lapse video of the herpes going away or something. I don't know what his plan was, but he injected himself on a Facebook Live, which must have sounded like a great idea at the time. But, I think over probably after he did that, he was probably kind of like, why? What? I didn't maybe think this one all the way through. Injecting, I'm not a fan of. I would say take stuff orally, or if there's like a patch or something, you could take something through your skin, maybe that way. But to inject, that's just too problematic for me to get down with. Even the holistic a-hole, I don't plan on injecting myself with anything anytime soon, or probably ever. But that's how crazy this guy was, and so he got a lot of flack from the FDA, of course. I mean, as crazy as that is, of course, the FDA is going to come forward and say, look, man, hey, we don't really condone you doing this because we haven't run our tests on it. And, everybody, the mainstream fucking audience of people is probably like, yeah, duh. We only trust things that are approved by the FDA, despite the fact that there's a lot of shenanigans in the FDA, as far as government officials and things that get approved, and the amount of paperwork and bureaucracy and lawyers and money that goes into getting, a patent on a drug to begin with. I mean, of course, there's so many medications and there's so many, just medicines and things that have not been approved by the FDA that could actually help people. But because the pharmaceuticals haven't put the patent out themselves, and a lot of these things are through independent laboratories, or even like big name people who, can't, they can't get like an Alzheimer's drug passed because it doesn't meet the FDA's requirement, whatever that is. It's just so much shenanigans with the FDA, and people are suffering because they require a certain amount of quote unquote studies to be done. But if you label yourself as a supplement, you could do whatever the hell you want. If you're a drug, you have to go through the FDA. If you're a supplement, it requires zero regulation. If you come out with a powder and say this powder, helps improve your memory, and it's just basically like corn powder or something, you can put it on the fucking market. Doesn't matter. So the FDA wasn't down with this dude injecting himself online. And like I said, I'm not really either. I don't like that idea. I find the biohacking community, from what I know about it, to be kind of annoying. There's a lot of interesting therapies that do this kind of biohacking thing, where it's like it's tricking your senses into believing that you're like light therapy or sound therapy. There's all these different detox things, ozone, eczemas, and colonics. A lot of the stuff I'm down with, because let's face it, living in a city, living in an urban environment, like I live in New York City, I don't have access to fucking trees and sunlight and the right sounds and the right amount of light going into my eye, and my pineal gland's all fucked up. My melatonin distribution is all fucking out of whack. So sometimes like going and sitting in an ultraviolet or whatever the hell it is, UV, I think it's UVB or UVA rays that you don't get anything from while living in a city. Anything that helps my vitamin D levels, anything that can just help my body, like I'm down to try. But sometimes the biohacking community goes too far. My best friend, Dave Asprey, that's all he does. He's got the blue blocker glasses. And I mean, there's a point where you drive yourself to paranoia. And to be honest with you, ever since I did the float tank, I kind of believe that a lot of my problems that I feel like I healed in the float tank came from the fact that maybe this holistic thing is driving me a little bit crazy. Maybe I'm striving for this level of perfection into health that just might not be possible. And striving to reach it might be doing more harm than good, Sure, yeah, I keep up healthy levels of white blood cells or whatever. Yeah, sure, I'm eating good foods and having good solid bowel movements. Yeah. All that stuff's great. But the pressure it takes to keep it up and keep it going can sometimes be a little overwhelming, even for me. And I think maybe in the subconscious, that imperfection causes a little bit of gets me a little off balance, and that affects the sleep in a real deep psychological way. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just taking a stab at it. But I do know if you do call yourself a biohacker, you're probably driving yourself beyond crazy. I know there's biohackers out there that they do anything they think is going to get them a little bit of an edge. I think the latest thing now is like microdosing psilocybin mushrooms. I mean, come on, dude. Like, just fucking meditate and get your mind central. If you do mushrooms, you might have a crazy trip and have some crazy insight, or you might just trip your balls or put your mind in a state that you just feel better. You're not coming up necessarily with any brilliant ideas, Sometimes you got to sift through thousands and thousands and thousands of shit ideas until something brilliant pops up. That's just the creative process, You probably never gonna get to a 1-to-1 ratio. It might be 1 to every 10,000 is where your good ideas come from. And don't cheat the process. So I guess my underlying theme here with this dude is it's really sad that he passed away, but what I don't want to get twisted in the message is that a float tank is gonna do you any harm. This dude did not die because of a float tank. He probably died because he had something in his system. And like I said, when you go in the float tank, if you're claustrophobic in any way, you start to feel that, it gets stuffy in there. It's hot, you can get dehydrated. You're sitting in salt, you get dehydrated very easily. So while it's very effective, it's also in a way, there are some safety issues, but tank that's very easy to open up. So if you get a chance to float, and then do me a favor, let me know on the socials how it worked out for you. Send me a line. Be like, hey man, floating was great. Hey man, floating was the most frightening thing I've ever done. Hey man, I floated and I just wrote a novel. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear your experience. Make sure you find me on all the socials to let me know. Twitter @HolisticAhole, Instagram @HolisticAhole, Facebook, find the Facebook Holistic A-Hole page. Shoot me an email, holistic.a.hole@gmail.com. Let me know what's going on. And what's fun to do is take a screenshot of the Holistic A-Hole podcast playing in your player and tag me on your Instagram story or your Instagram feed, whatever it is. So let's connect, baby. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you get a chance, make sure you subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and let me know what you think of the episodes. Be sure to share this with your friends. Listen to other episodes, catch up, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, y'all. Peace.